Scarecrow? Scarecrow, come on, baby. Dad needs another gun rack. Damn it, another bat. Oh, welcome back, creepers. It's your old friend Gourdy here with another story from Diana Blakely. What would you sacrifice to get everything your heart desires? Zach is an out-of-work man living welfare check to welfare check, and he can't make ends meet. He and his wife are about to answer this question.
Lucky one. It could be crouching at the end of the dark hallway, low on its belly, elbows and knees jutting up, giving it the look of a spider, thick saliva oozing from its grinning mouth, waiting for Zach to get close enough to yank him by the ankle so that he would fall to the floor and crack his head hard enough to daze him, nothing more than a startled "what?" escaping his throat. Then again, maybe it wouldn't wait. Maybe it would scuttle toward him with lizard speed, feet and hands shushing over the matted carpet until it was close enough to leap. Would it make any noises on its way, like growling or panting? Or would it remain silent until the final moment? The shadow didn't move, and though Zach strained, even tilting his right ear in its direction, he couldn't hear anything. He really wasn't that thirsty, didn't really need to make the trip down the hall through his 2-bedroom trailer, past the bathroom, through the dark living room, and into the kitchen, where even the light from the fridge wouldn't expel the darkness, because there wouldn't be any light. He had candles, sure, and matches, and a flashlight, all for just such an emergency, and they were all tucked safely in the junk drawer in the kitchen. To get those, he would need to make the same trip, through the hallway. Zach squinted at the shadow, trying to pierce the darkness, to discern what the hell it was. Maybe it was just a pillow, or a blanket. His head thudded, a dagger stabbing his brain repeatedly through his eye, and his tongue made a dry smacking sound as he peeled it from the roof of his mouth, which tasted like a seedy bar's bathroom floor and probably smelled worse. He couldn't remember going to bed, couldn't remember just how many drinks he'd thrown down his gullet in the name of fun. Stacy snorted and mumbled in an alien language in her sleep from behind him. He jumped, feeling enough electricity to relight the trailer had just shot through him before he realized it was only her. She always talked like that in her sleep when they passed out rather than falling asleep sober, like an alien from another world, strange noises and sound combinations that seemed like words someone might understand if they had traveled here from another galaxy. With a shaky sigh, he looked back at her and felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up and his arms ripple in goosebumps despite the heat and humidity. She lay sprawled across their bed, blankets kicked off, her good legs and better ass smooth and lovely in the darkness. Just a hint of moonlight shone through the side of the blanket they had tacked over their window, offering just enough light for him to make out the shape of her. But no such light shone through the living room windows. The moon was on the wrong side of the trailer for that. He tried not to let her drunken, sleep-induced babbling play with his head further. Something was at the end of the hallway, blocking his path that only made itself known by being darker than the surrounding darkness. Something that waited for him. Maybe. This was stupid. He was too old for this baby shit. What he could remember was them being playful with each other, tickling each other, laughing, a small pillow fight that ended with him tackling her to the floor. He remembered her flushed cheeks as she looked into her eyes, her big smile, the taste of whiskey and coke on her breath when she kissed him. He remembered the firmness of her breast in his hand as he entered her, the carpet burning his knees with friction, the way she moaned and bit into his shoulder. It had been so good. And why shouldn't it? They deserved it. After all, He remembered her pouring them another drink, and after that, things start to get fuzzy. So what was it at the end of the hall? He took a tentative step forward, placing his toes first so as not to make any sounds. Every step seemed to shudder through the floor of the trailer, seemed to make it shake on its frame, and he didn't want to disturb Stacy, or so he told himself. What he was really thinking, though, is that he didn't want to cause the thing at the end of the hall to think he was attacking or anything crazy. But one step was all he could bring himself to do. Stacy snorted again and stopped her muttering, whereas before he had wanted her to be quiet because the language she was speaking had been freaking him out. Now he wished for the noise again, because without it, it was just him and the thing at the end of the hall. As stupid as he thought he was being, he couldn't bring himself to move. He closed his eyes, trying to think through the ache in his skull, to remember what they were doing before going to bed. What could that be on the floor? If the power wasn't out, he'd simply flick on the hall light and find out. Rolling blackouts. Gotta love 'em. A sound like a hiss came from down the hall, and he almost turned and ran back into the bedroom before he realized it was the toilet. It had a slow leak, and the tank was refilling the small amount of water lost. He sweated, but he wasn't sure if that was from the heat or his nerves. After their lovemaking, Zach and Stacy moved to the couch, and she had asked him, "Where do you think it came from?" She was referring to the winning lottery ticket they had found tucked under their worn-out welcome mat, the bright pink corner jutting out just enough to grab Zach's attention as he was leaving to check the mail. $3 million. That's how much the ticket was worth. Had the wind blown it there? Had someone picked the ticket, not knowing it was a winner, and slipped it under their mat as a good gesture? Zach didn't think it was either of these things. Zach had another idea as to where the ticket had come from, even though it seemed highly unlikely. The day before, he'd been going over their past due bills and credit card statements. They needed to continue using the cards to be able to buy food, but they couldn't afford to pay the minimum amount due each month, which meant more fees, more debt. They had both been out of work for almost a year, and their welfare checks just weren't enough to help them through. He felt like a man who had swum into the ocean only to discover that the current had carried him out further and faster than he'd realized, and he was now far too tired to swim back. And in that moment, he thought to himself that he would give anything just to have money. And not just enough to get by. He was sick to death of seeing all these assholes buying whatever the hell they wanted when they wanted without so much as a thought as to how much they spent where he and Stacy had needed to roll pennies just to get gas. And that was when they still had a car. So yeah, he had been thinking to himself, thinking hard about how he would give anything to have enough money to take care of Stacy the way she deserved, enough to start a family, enough to go on a honeymoon, a real honeymoon, as opposed to the weekend they spent in their trailer just drinking and having sex. He would even sell his soul. And he wasn't thinking this in passing, the way a person does, who either doesn't believe in the devil, in the existence of a soul, the way a person might casually say, "I would sell my soul for a cup of coffee right now," if they're feeling particularly fatigued. No, he believed, and he meant it. If the devil had offered him a contract right then, he would have signed on the line just to have all that money. But no devil had appeared. The earth didn't open onto a fiery pit and swallow him into Satan's office, where they went over the terms of the contract. There was no deal. And yet, the next morning, when he opened the front door, the color pink caught his eye, and he looked down. There it was, the lottery ticket, and it was a winner. That's what he thought about now as he peered into the darkness, straining his eyes to see what they were incapable of seeing. Did the shadow move? A little slump to the side, maybe? He took another step, again trying to make no noise. This was so dumb. Angry at himself for letting his bleary, whiskey-influenced imagination take over, he stood straight, took a deep breath, and willed himself to walk the 8 steps down the hall, maybe even intentionally letting his feet fall louder than normal. After only 4 steps, however, he heard a soft, gurgling laughter coming from the shadowy thing on the floor. It was then that he caught the glint of the dimmest light in what could only be eyes. In the moment, it took his brain to register that his worst fears were true, that the shadow at the end of the hall was not his imagination, but an actual creature here to take him. The thing sprang at him. He had time enough to wonder if Stacy would wake up, come to his rescue somehow. It sank its needle-like teeth into his shoulder, the same spot Stacy had bitten earlier, and tore his deltoid from the bone, snapping the tendons. As the world left him, he heard a raspy voice whisper, "I don't need your soul. Your flesh will do just fine."
Integrity is often sacrificed for personal gain, but a man without integrity will soon be devoured by his personal demons. Zach got to meet his demon in the flesh, and from the sounds of it, his flesh was tasty. Until next time, keep it real, my friends.